Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take a look at our P6 modified. This P6 modified is essentially derived from the P6 or P6 practice that focused on the use of a products.csv file to keep track of some of the items that might be sold in a kiosk or a convenience store. This project assumes that you have completed your P6, as we will be relying very heavily on that one. As a matter of fact, the purpose of this video is simply to show the difference between the P6 and the P6 modified and essentially set up the project. Now, first and foremost, what is the difference between these two projects? Well, if you recall from our original P6 with the products, we were limited to 100 elements in our array of structures. Now, for the particular input file that we were working with, that was not a problem. If anything, that was too much memory allocated at once. And if you recall, we simply allocated 100 elements in our array of structures, and we dictated that by our n max. Instead, what we want to do is we want to use a combination of malloc and realloc to be able to dynamically assign the memory in such a way that if we have either less than 100 elements, we won't be wasting memory. And if we have more than 100 elements or 100 rows, we won't have to stop. So to begin with, we want to go ahead and take a quick look at our P6 practice and remind ourselves of the components of it. Recall that we have the ability to import and then display the products as well as copying the products. We could also search the array of structures, and then we could export based on whatever criterion we matched in our searches. The idea was that this nmax simply controlled the maximum number of elements in our array. And you can see here that in our main, we simply used it as a way of declaring the size of our products and also our results products arrays. Now, granted, this was an incredible waste of memory, particularly because our sample file was so small. So our goal with our P6 modified is to make some significant improvements to this concept. And this video is going to focus solely on moving your functions over, making some slight changes in your function signatures, as well as setting up the main. You can think of this as somewhat of a setup video. And so to begin with, we want to go ahead and create a new C and C++ application. We will simply call this one P6 modified. And to keep with the theme that we've already started, I'm going to call this one P6 modified practice. Now, again, as far as the name of the main file, we are simply going to keep that, and we can hit finish. And at this point, we will have a project, an empty project with our main in it, and we simply want to work to bring over the relevant pieces. I'm going to go ahead and start by simply moving over our comment block at the top of the file, as well as the relevant includes. In this case, I want to also have my string.h. And at this point, then we can go ahead and bring some of our comment block templates over, including our main, and then also just a copy of one of the ones in front of our functions. Again, we need to go back through when we finish these projects and improve on our documentation. Now, let's take a close look at the function signatures themselves. In other words, the prototypes up top, and let's see what's going to be different. Well, it turns out we're not going to be changing much about the type def in this particular video. In other words, our product properties stay the exact same. That's probably good news for those of y'all worried about having to change the fscanf as we brought in the data from the file. But the good news is nothing changes with respect to our structure. Now, with respect to the function signatures, however, there are going to be a few changes. And to begin with, let's just go ahead and copy over all of our function prototypes, and then we can talk about the differences in the old versions and the new versions. Now, keep in mind, the idea here is that this version of our functions won't necessarily be using arrays, but will rather be using pointers to the beginning of the array of, in this case, product properties, and also an array of integers. So essentially what we're going to be doing is we are going to be passing by address the start of the array. Now, what's the significant difference? Well, that allows for us to essentially pass a null reference to our function, and then at that point, then use either malloc or realloc to allocate the appropriate amount of memory. And since we are passing the pointer by reference, then we can simply update in the function the location of the memory where we have allocated enough space for our array. Now, that probably sounds like a lot to begin with, but let's take this piece by piece. We want to start by thinking about where do we actually need to update any of our arrays. And if you recall from our original P6, we passed the file name as well as an array of structures to our import products, and we simply kept track of how many of our products were read in from the file. Clearly, the goal here was to update this particular array. This seems like a great place to start, and we will by simply changing this now to the address of the start of the array. And the double asterisk means that we're actually passing the address of the variable that points to the start of the array. Again, let's take this piece by piece. We're only going to make a few changes between our P6 and our P6 modified, but they are going to be very crucial in allowing us to use dynamic memory allocation. Going through some of our other functions, you'll see that our display product deals with a single properties structure, and so no changes will need to be made there. Our display properties also deals with an array of structures. However, it is assumed that the array of structures has already been created, and we are simply passing it to the display products function. Therefore, there will be, in fact, no change to this particular function. Likewise, with the copy product, you'll notice that it deals with a by reference or by address passing of two structures, the source and the destination. And although we do modify the destination, we are assuming that the destination address has already been created, or that block of memory for that structure has already been created. Therefore, we don't have to worry about modifying this function signature either. The copy products function, however, is going to require just a little bit of modification. Particularly, we want to consider modifying the destinations. If you recall from the P6, or rather the original P6, we basically updated the elements in the array according to how many matches were found. In other words, basically, however many indexes there were in our indices. And as such, we also want the ability to simply pass to this, again, a null value. And the idea is that we will simply build up our destinations array inside of our copy products. So again, we will switch this from a simple array to the pointer to the beginning of the array, and also we will pass this by reference, hence the reason for the two asterisks. And again, nothing changes with our int m and our int m, and likewise, nothing will change in our export products. Again, why? Well, it turns out the file name won't be changed, nor will the export results be changed by our export products function. And so that leaves just our search functions. And again, there's going to be just a few minor changes, specifically when it comes to the indices, because again, remember that you kind of want to be able to grow the indices depending on the number of matches that you find. Now, we will go into the changes for these particular functions in separate videos, but for right now, we simply want to do the same thing that we did before, in that we want to change this now to a by reference passing or by address passing of the beginning of integer arrays or vectors. And again, the M does not change because it was already passed by reference or by address. Now, essentially, that's it for our changes in our function signatures. We probably want to take just a second to convert all of our function signatures into function implementations. And I'm simply going to copy and paste all of my function signatures down below my main. I am going to go ahead and move my help up a little closer to main so that we can go ahead and get started on that and work on that. And at the same time, I'm going to copy my comment block in front of each one of my function implementations. And again, this is going to take us just a second. The regular pattern here, if you would, of creating these empty functions, adding our comment block, and then setting a default return value. Again, in just a second, we will get to that. But for now, I'm just going to expand each of these prototypes out into a function stub, and then add the comment block in front of it. This is getting a little wide here. I'm trying to keep all of this on one screen. And then we'll just simply go through now, adding our comment block. Trying to keep some space between our functions. And then lastly, we want to go through then and set our int results. We want to initialize it to exit success, because again, we're going to be optimistic, and we want to return our results. At this point, we simply want to go ahead and put this into each one of our functions. And then the last thing that we want to do in this video is simply go back to our original P6 and very carefully, I think I've missed one of my curly braces here. There we go. And then very carefully go through and bring over our main. All right, so let's go and take just a second to build this to make sure that we still have working code. Looks good so far. Now let's focus on our main. Now, for this particular one, we're going to rely very heavily on our P6, mainly because there are virtually no changes in our main. There will be a few variable declarations that change, but other than that, the core portion of the logic stays exactly the same. And so I'm going to very carefully bring over piece by piece, starting with the for loop that simply looks through each of the input arguments using our index. And then I'm going to go through and selectively pull over the if statement that triages the arguments. I am going to go ahead and skip over our attempt to use a beta switch because we won't actually need it for this particular video. And then again, I'm going to carefully copy over the remaining of the portion of the code all the way down to the end of our else. And then I will simply remove the code inside of each of the branches of our if statement. So again, very carefully just reaching in and going through piece by piece here. I'm going to go ahead and pull out all of the code associated. I've accidentally went too far here. There we go. And then lastly, this portion. And at this point, then it's just going to be a game to make sure that I have all of my if statements lined up correctly. You can see here that I appear to have one missing. Let's take a second to see if we can find it. And so I've got my if statement for my search. And I want to search by ID. I seem to have accidentally deleted that one. So we'll start off with this again. So if our argc was equal to 4 and our string compare I, argv square brackets 2 matched, then ID, if that was equal to 0, then we simply we're calling our print statement. So printf calling /ID followed by a new line and then a semicolon. And I think this should probably get us mostly straightened out. Now we'll add one more print statement here with our name. And we should at this point be set to go. Let's go ahead and build it. And at this point, we can come out to the console and we can just verify that we have, in fact, been able to move over all of our switches, courses, E233 projects. And this is going to be our P6 modified practice, dist, debug, min GW. And then you'll see there is our P6 modified. The only thing that we have left to do is to go ahead and bring over the stub for our help. In this case, we can simply use some of the syntax from our original P6 and simply paste it into the help. And then we can simply modify this by using Control-C, Control-H. And we'll change this now to _modified _practice. Replace all of those and once again build it. And if we run this, we should get the modified help. And again, we can go through and we can test some of these. We can test our /?, /h, /nonsense, and then so on. And we can also dig into some of the search features. So search ID. And then I'm going to provide then just a sample ID here of 001, which again, our project is not set up yet. So at this point, it's just going to let us know that it's calling search, calling ID. And then the last thing that we want to do before we leave our setup is we want to launch Explorer in our current working directory. And you'll see that there is the executable. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to add a copy of the products.csv from our P6 into our P6 modified. Now, at this point, we should be ready to go to start working on the individual functions. And again, I'm going to try to focus solely on the difference in the functions so that you can appreciate what changes between the static and the dynamic memory allocation. Hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.